Spoilers ahead. You were warned, dummy. So, I've never played a Final Fantasy game in my life. And with the release of FF7 Remake, I thought that it would be a good time for me to get into the series. The hype surrounding this game is ridiculous. So my plan was to basically play this game during quarantine, and maybe talk to you guys about my first experience with a Final Fantasy game. So I decided to pre-order the deluxe edition of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Mostly because it came with an art book. But the GameStop I pre-ordered it in closed down because of the virus, so I'm gonna talk to you guys about Resident Evil 3 instead. Stars. I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil 3 lately. Like, a lot. Mike and I platinumed this game in like a week. This game is addicting. I've played this game so much that I've memorized all the cutscenes like the back of my hand.
Hey look, it's IMUBCS platoon leader Mikhail Victor.
Why can't I study for exams like how I study this game?
Word!
Now, I know this game has its faults. I mean, look at that Metacritic score. Yeesh. Don't get me wrong, I still love this game. I just kinda wished it was better. With this video, I wanted to create a hypothetical update to the game, suggest a few ways that it could have been more polished, improved, and maybe spitball some ideas on how to make a definitive Resident Evil 3 remake. Full disclaimer, I've never actually beaten the original RE3. A friend of mine let me borrow it back in the day, but I just never had the time to fully beat the whole game. But I have watched a lot of full gameplay walkthroughs of it way back in the day, and I'm familiar with some of the things that they cut out in Remake. I'm also aware that this game was developed around the same time as RE2 Remake. So it's kinda interesting why Capcom went in this direction than keeping it faithful to the original. Resident Evil 3 Remake is actually more of a Resident Evil 3 reboot and a big reimagining of the original game. So what we're going to try and do here is we're going to try to make changes to this game to keep it as faithful to the original as possible, but also keeping the changes that Capcom made. Because a lot of the criticisms that this game received from hardcore Resident Evil fans is that it wasn't really Resident Evil 3. It just feels like a brand new game with elements from Resident Evil 3. With that being said, let's jump.
Yeah! Oh my god, no, we're doing this early?
Stars. For starters, this opening sequence was pretty clever, I have to admit. Using real people and real footage gave this game a bit of an uneasy feeling for me, considering how this game's opening sequence sort of mimics the real world right now. I mean, it's kind of scary out there, guys. I just found it funny that we were going to get 2 zombie-related games this year, and right around the same time, and... oh no. Naughty Dog, no! Why? So the game opens up with Jill Valentine, and oh my god, she is amazing in this game. I feel that this is the best interpretation of the character that we've ever gotten. The opening is a real treat for hardcore RE fans, because this just goes to show that Jill is still recovering from the events of RE1. I do feel that this part is kinda lost on casual players and those who haven't played the original Resident Evil game, so I kinda wish that they added some sort of dialogue where you hear Chris, Barry, and maybe even Wesker during the events of Resident Evil 1. So this way we have a bit more clarity just for the casuals out there. It's basically just to show people that this is not her first zombie apocalypse rodeo.
I know what a radio is.
First things first.
Anyways, this entire opening sequence is really good. We meet Nemesis right off the bat. Having Nemesis introduced in the beginning is a smart move. This just shows to the player that Jill is not safe, and that she's constantly gonna have to watch her back because this guy is right up on her ass. And this game's opening is a lot better than the originals. I mean, Jill just busts out of a burning building with no explanation. It's kind of weird. Speaking of weird, this entire sequence is basically the reveal trailer for this game. It's basically a playable cutscene. A lot of hardcore fans didn't like this at all. The fact that these cutscenes replaced a good chunk of gameplay. Personally, I feel that this entire section should have been dedicated to teaching the player how to play the game. Here's what I mean. I feel that we should have been taught how to shoot the moment Nemesis crashes through the wall. I mean, Jill grabs her gun anyway, right? Wouldn't it make sense to teach the player how to shoot right here instead of here? I don't know about you guys, but the fact that Nemesis was after me, my first instinct was to reserve all my bullets. The fact that zombies are a lot harder to kill this time around, there's really no point in you wasting your ammo when you have a 10 feet mutant monster chasing you all over the city. Sure, shooting zombies is a big part of this game. I mean, it is Resident Evil after all. I feel that teaching the player how to shoot Nemesis is a lot more beneficial than teaching them how to shoot a zombie. Think about it. There are two things happening here. One, it teaches the player about the game's mechanics. This is how you shoot. Two, it also teaches the player a little something about the story. Nemesis can't be harmed by normal means. And the best part about this is the fact that the player is making these conclusions based on their actions, and not by watching a cutscene. Kind of like how Mr. X would, "Oh my god, get me the hell out of here!" I also found it jarring that they taught you how to run out here in the streets to follow Brad, rather than here where Nemesis is actively trying to crush you with a giant slab of concrete. Considering that this is a more action-packed game, the player should be learning a bunch of these things super early on before throwing them out into the streets. Speaking of streets, can we just talk about how beautiful Raccoon City is? This game's graphics engine is so gorgeous. I mean, look at that. Look at that. I'd watch that movie. This city is so beautiful that it's a shame that we don't get to explore it. The game moves at such a breakneck speed that it feels like it's just moving you along from one area to another as quickly as possible. The moment you meet Brad is the moment the game tells you to stop looking around and follow the guy in the yellow vest. Seriously. And the fact that we don't even come back to this area really is some wasted potential. I feel that this area could have served as a good way to teach the player how to explore the city, how to interact with people, how to interact with objects, gather materials. Which brings me to my first edit. Remember when Brad calls Jill and tells her to get out of her apartment? I would have added a line there that told Jill to meet up at Bar Jack. This way we don't really meet him at the alley, but more of an objective for the player to go look for Brad. You might be wondering why I would make this edit, and that's because I have plans for Chicken Heart Vickers. Chicken Heart Vickers. But mostly because I want the player to explore the city as much as possible. I would have dedicated this entire part on teaching the player how to use the map. It would allow Jill to explore the liquor store, maybe even visit Sigourney Weaver's cafe. Alien references. I probably would have also blocked the path leading into Bar Jack, just so that the player can find a different way to get in. Like, maybe instead of entering through the front door, you have to find a way to enter through the back. This will encourage the player to explore the area as thoroughly as possible before progressing with the story. Here's a cool idea on how you can make this part a lot more interesting as well. When I first saw the subway car and I saw a bunch of people inside, I first assumed that we were going to get a new gameplay mechanic where you can go around and save people from Raccoon City. Kinda like how Frank West saves a bunch of people in the mall in Dead Rising. Except we don't have to do a stupid escort mission. God, I hate escort missions.
Leon! Leon! Leon!
Oh my god, shut up! One gameplay mechanic that a lot of fans wished were in this game was the original's live selection options. It was basically a choose-your-own-adventure mechanic. I thought that this would be a fun way to implement that back, but without those big giant letters right in your face. It sort of becomes up to the player to make the choice. Imagine there just being a bunch of people in Raccoon City that you can save, and that you can meet them again if you'd ever decide to go back to the subway car. And there should be some sort of reward attached to saving them, like maybe they give you ammo or herbs or something. Maybe even have a trophy achievement attached to it, like you've saved all the citizens. You can interact with them and feel good about yourself. You know, until Nemesis kills them all. Jill and Carlos go on and on about saving the city throughout the game.
But I am on their side, not yours. What matters is that we can get everyone out of the city now.
If it means I can help save the city, it's fine by me.
But we never actually see them helping anyone. I think this would be a good way to implement that and help build their character. It's not like they really need it. I mean, this is one of the best interpretations of these two characters ever.
It's alright, you're going ahead. I'm not gonna die on you, leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
Okay.
But this would be a nice cherry on the top. I think it would have been a really cool mechanic. So now you have a new objective. Find Brad. Let's say you find a back alley that you can use to enter Bar Jack. But there's a fence where there's a bunch of zombies right behind it. And then all of a sudden they just crash right through. Here's a new tutorial for you. Shoot the red barrels. Video games. I thought that we were gonna get that tutorial right here when they bust through the fence, but I was wrong. All you had to do was walk past them, and it was kinda boring. This would be the perfect time to introduce the fact that you can use your environment to destroy enemies. Video games. So you blow up a bunch of zombies and you're able to enter the bar. When you walk in, you find Brad, and he's being attacked by a zombie. He doesn't get bit like he does in the original in this one. You just have the option of shooting the zombie down or not. For obvious story reasons, you have to shoot the zombie or Brad dies. Once you shoot the zombie down, Brad thanks you and sits down for a bit. At this point, you can just explore the bar before going over to Brad and talking to him. It would be really cool if you find your first safe right here in the bar. You can probably find a combination on a note. And what do you get for solving this little puzzle? Your knife. I always wondered where I picked up the knife, but after playing this game a lot of times, like a lot, I realized that Jill picks it up right here when she helps Brad. So you get the knife via cutscene. Question mark? In RE2 Remake, you get the knife because Marvin gives it to you for basically surviving the East Wing. It's like a prize. Considering that the knife has no durability this time around, it should feel like a reward when you get it. I mean, it's your most reliable tool in the game. You explore the bar and maybe you find some gunpowder and some herbs. The bar seems like a good place to learn how to combine things. Instead of combining a bunch of alcohol, you're combining a bunch of dank weed. Also, it would be nice to find your first typewriter here. Once you're done exploring the bar and maybe even saved your game, you can now walk over to Brad and interact with him. From here, Brad can inform Jill about Nemesis and why he's after stars. Basically, just move the dialogue they would have had in the alley right here in the bar instead. The two of them make plans to leave the city and maybe even throw in a line in there where Brad suggests to go back to the RPD. Then, just as they're about to leave,
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Stars.
Nemesis comes busting through the front door. I find it weird that Nemesis doesn't really chase any other STARS members other than Jill in this game, because in the original he was chasing Brad pretty good, and he even manages to kill him.
Jill!
Brad!
We've gotta... Jill! Help!
A cool thing that could happen here is that Nemesis attacks Brad with a tentacle and infects him with the T-virus, just like what he does to Jill later on in the game. This way we can say that Nemesis actually killed a STARS member. Maybe not directly this time around, but indirectly? Poor Brad. Brad and Jill decides to split up and Jill exits the bar. Remember that zombie that shows up that teaches you how to shoot? Yeah, instead of that guy, it's Nemesis. So now you're having a small chase sequence going on, and there's a red barrel that you could use to incapacitate him. You shoot it, and then boom. It stops Nemesis in his tracks, and that sign that falls in front of Jill instead falls on top of Nemesis, stopping him and giving you time to leave. This basically teaches you that, hey, you can stop Nemesis with red barrels. Who would have thought? So things are pretty much the same from here on out. You have the helicopter tell you to go up to the parking garage roof, and you run into Dario Rosso. It's kind of weird that he's in the game, but you don't see him after this part. In the original game, you can actually come back here and find out what happens to him. Corona! I feel that we should be able to come back here. If not Jill, maybe Carlos? We'll figure that out later. So you head over to the parking garage, and these two zombies pop out of the elevator. You either avoid them or you shoot them, your choice, and you take the elevator up to the roof. Only this time, let's have the elevator stop halfway. So what now? This is the part where we can teach the player how to use key items. Let's say that there's a door that gives you access to the roof, but it's locked, so you need to find a key. Now you have to go around the parking garage floors to try and find the zombie with the key on him. Who knows, maybe this guy has it. So you acquire the key and you go up to the roof. Maybe you fight some zombies along the way, nothing too difficult. The purpose of having that part here is so that we can teach the player how to use the key items without having the fear of Nemesis trying to stop you from solving a puzzle.
Now is not the time for fear. That comes later.
Cause in this version of the game, we're gonna make Nemesis really aggressive. So basically at this point, you've learned everything about the game's mechanics. You've learned how to shoot, you've learned how to run and move around, you've learned how to use your map and explore the city, you know how to combine herbs, combine items, you've learned about how to solve puzzles by paying close attention to files that you find lying around, you've learned how to use your environment to your advantage, you've learned how to save your game, and now you've learned how to use key items to open up new areas in the game. So you've learned everything there is to know about how to play Resident Evil 3 Remake.
Or did I?
Cat, you're not helping!
So you get up to the parking garage roof and the helicopter is waiting for you. You go there and the cutscene plays out. Nemesis is so terrifying in this moment. I mean, look at that. He's just menacingly walking towards you. After Nemesis blows up the helicopter, Jill jumps into Ethan's car and then rams Nemesis using a QuickTime event. But what if she doesn't do that first?
Go on.
The parking garage roof is big enough for an actual boss fight here. I think it would be really cool if you get to face this version of Nemesis, the one with the stupid trash bag over his face, right up here at the parking garage. Consider this a test. You're using everything that you've learned to beat Nemesis in this boss fight. But now the game introduces to you the last and most important game mechanic.
Dodge!
The dodge. The dodge in this game is so good. It's a lot better than the dodge in the original. And perfect dodging is so satisfying once it rewards you with a critical hit. The game teaches you how to dodge right here. It makes sense. You have one zombie in a big open space. It's basically encouraging you to practice here. So you're wondering why I would introduce the dodge mechanic here at your first boss fight. And that's because I think it's easier to dodge Nemesis than to dodge zombies. Zombies have an ambiguous and unpredictable walking pattern, so sometimes you'll just walk right into them, even if you dodged. Nemesis, however, has a lot of wind-up frames before every attack, making it easy to determine when you need to dodge. This boss fight doesn't necessarily have to be difficult, it just needs to be able to teach you how to dodge properly. Throughout the game we get like 4 boss fights with Nemesis, and not all of them are great. The best boss fight by far is Nemesis with the flamethrower. That was pretty cool. I think the moment Nemesis turns into that big xenomorph form, Alien references is the moment Nemesis stops being cool. Because after you beat him in this form, you don't really see him up until the lab. Terminator Nemesis is way better than Xenomorph Nemesis. Just saying. So I think it would be kinda cool to have more boss fights with Nemesis. Specifically this form. The one where he has a trash bag over his face. Stars. So how would this boss fight even play out? Well, you could use your environment around you, right? Maybe there's a bunch of electrical generators that you can shoot to stun him, and maybe some red barrels sprinkled throughout the parking garage roof. Nemesis has different movesets depending on which form he's in.
Oh, what the? Oh my god.
In this basic form, maybe his moveset could just revolve around him trying to punch you as hard as he can. Maybe he can also use the environment to try and hurt you. Like, maybe he can push over street lights to fall on you. Maybe even pick up a car and chuck it right at your face. Nemesis throwing things at Jill could actually help the player learn how to dodge. Then, once you've beat him, the cutscene plays out. Congratulations, you beat Trashbag Nemesis. I love this shot right here. The reason I wanted a boss fight with Trashbag Nemesis in the first place is so that this becomes the big payoff. Watching the fire burn away his mask and seeing his face for the first time signals to the player that now the kid gloves are off. It's kind of like how when you shoot Mr. X's hat.
You motherfucker! Oh, Kyle, Jesus Christ!
For some reason, I think that he becomes a little bit more aggressive after you shoot his hat. This part basically marks the end of your tutorial. You beat Nemesis, Carlos saves you, and you both head to the subway station. If you're not gonna come back to this area as Jill, you might as well turn it into one big tutorial stage. Sort of like an extended version of the gas station in RE2 Remake. By extending the game's opening into one big playable tutorial, we can smoothen out the game's weird pacing issues and even add more game time to its already short campaign. Resident Evil games are relatively short games. One of the big appeals of these games are its speedrun options. It's honestly what makes them addicting to play. But considering that this game doesn't exactly have scenario options like in Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 1, the game's campaign should be a tad longer. I understand why Capcom would choose to cut a whole bunch of the beginning out. There were a bunch of puzzles in the original that required you to backtrack quite a bit. Puzzles aren't bad, in fact they're a staple of the series, but in the original Resident Evil 3 they felt kind of tedious. And considering that this installment is more of an action-packed game, it would make sense why they would cut out certain parts that didn't really need to be there. And that's my take on how to polish the beginning of Resident Evil 3 Remake. Just turn it into one big tutorial mission with a boss fight at the end. This way the player has enough time to get into the groove of things before they're thrown into the subway car segments of the game. Because Jill's main objective after this point in the game is to try and get the train moving, and not much else. You're pretty much just relegated to the subway and downtown Raccoon City. You don't get to visit City Hall, you don't even get to visit the park. Hell, you can't even visit RPD, which was kinda weird. Jill is a STARS member. I figured that the first stop that she would make is RPD. Sure, you get to visit RPD with Carlos, but it's a really big missed opportunity that you couldn't do that with Jill. I was trying to look for a good way to implement RPD in this game right in the beginning, so I made this dumbass map of Raccoon City. I made sure that everything was in the right place so that I can keep track of where Jill could be at all times. God, I feel like a stalker. Jill visiting RPD really revolves around how close she is in the beginning of the game. So one of the things that I needed to do was find out how close her apartment was to the police station. And since they didn't give you a map of the beginning area, damn it Capcom, I had to go make my own. So now I have this puzzle piece to try and figure out where it fits. But then I found this map online, and it's a pretty good map. I'm not sure if it's official, I mean, it looks official, but if anybody knows where this map came from, can you please tell me? Write it down in the comment section below, because I have problems with this map. According to this map, Jill lives pretty close to the police station. It makes sense. We see the movie theater and then we see the parking garage where she crashes into Nemesis. But here's the part that doesn't make any sense. You're telling me that after Carlos downs Nemesis for the first time, he drags Jill from here all the way here? That's a walk, but let's just say that he does. It still doesn't make any sense. After downing Nemesis, Carlos and Jill walk into the subway station. Since the gate is locked, they go down this alternate path to reach the train. So according to the in-game map, they would have had to enter through here. They are pretty close to the orphanage from Resident Evil 2. So you're telling me that Carlos carried Jill from here all the way up here? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. This means that Jill's apartment is more around this area, making her miles away from the police station. If this map is official, then I guess I know why they cut out the Raccoon City Police Department. It's because they have no real clue how to make a map. Regardless of the weird map, we should have been able to visit the police station with Jill. It just doesn't feel right to not do it. But let's keep going, shall we? Or we can pick this up later. I need a break. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Nice. I just want to thank you for making it to the very end. I mean, this video is pretty long and I'm not even done talking about Resident Evil 3. So don't forget to like, subscribe, you know, the whole deal. Part 2 will be along shortly, so keep an eye out. Thanks again, guys.